Let's chat about downlights. These are a workhorse of architectural lighting, really since they were invented. The downlight is an elegant way to introduce light into space without introducing an object into space. When you see downlights in a normal installation, you're not seeing this big box. You're really just seeing the bottom of the trim. This is typically mounted flush with the ceiling plane. So this is the thickness of a ceiling, and the trim sits, the finish of the trim sits just below the ceiling. This is an overlap flange, which helps to hide the hole cut in the ceiling so that it looks nice and clean. The anatomy of a downlight. We've got a light source in here. In this case, this is an MR16 halogen. We haven't updated this one for LED yet. But I think it's useful to look at the size and scale of these housings. That this is a non-IC rated housing. IC means insulation contact, and depending on where you're installing a downlight, you may need a housing which is rated for insulation to be right up against it. That can help with sound dampening in symphony spaces or recording studios, or it could be required by code on attics or other areas. Now, this large box, even though it's not IC rated, is large because of the amount of heat that we have to dissipate. The halogen lamp inside creates a lot of heat, and we need enough space for that heat to go somewhere. With LED as a light source and the use of heat sinks and fins, things like that to help dissipate heat, the anatomy of modern downlights is changing significantly. You may no longer see giant back boxes like this in North American downlights. You may just see smaller lights that go above the ceiling. It's important to understand what kind of recess depth is available above the ceiling. This is an almost 6.5-inch deep box to hold that housing. This housing is significantly deeper than many modern downlights. And that can be a conflict if you've got HVAC and ductwork that's running above the ceiling, sprinkler systems, and other things that might conflict with the downlights. So whenever you're selecting the downlight, one of the first questions you should be asking your architect is, what's above the ceiling? What do I have to work with? How much recess depth is available? And I can't tell you the number of times that a contractor has ended up moving downlights a couple feet here, a couple feet there to work around ductwork. And then you come to punch list the site, and you've got a beautiful line of downlights except for 3, which are jig-jagged around. So again, the placement of thinking about the conflicts above the ceiling is essential. Now, in addition to the housing helping to dissipate the heat, we've got the driver or the transformer. In this case, this halogen light still has a transformer because it's a low voltage lamp. And then there's a splice box which allows the contractor to connect to wire this downlight housing along in series with other downlights on the same zone. And then within the trim itself, there's the reflector as well as the trim. This particular reflector has kind of a matte finish. It's not purely specular, it's not mirrored, but this will add some directional reflectance, but also help to blend out the scallops that we tend to see here. I'm going to go ahead and put this back in to show you. Now, putting this reflector in, we still see some striations, so I'm going to actually insert media into this. I'm going to put a filter in. Let's try 2 different filters. I've got a beam softener here, a Solite lens. First, I'm going to show you a linear spread lens. If I was going to try to mimic a wall washer or increase the spacing distance of the downlights along a hallway, I could try this particular linear spread lens. So the linear spread lens is spreading light further along the wall. It doesn't really do a lot to the wall itself. Now the Solite or microprismatic lens is meant to soften up this beam. So now the edges are much softer. We still have a little bit of a shadow at the top from the cutoff angle of the trim, but you have a more even beam. The last thing I wanted to talk about with downlights is, what are you trying to illuminate? A downlight in its name sort of says what it's meant to do. It's meant to push light down. It's not a wall washer. You may get light on the wall, but we're having scalloping and it's not an even amount of illumination. It's also not adjustable. It's very different than an adjustable accent, which we'll talk about later, which can really let you focus light on the wall. Downlights put light down. Along those lines, you need to think about the spacing between downlights. If my goal is to have uniform lighting on the floor or the working plane, where I currently have light landing from this, I can space these lights fairly far apart. But that means if they're close to the wall, I'm going to see a series of scallops. So I always have to think about the spacing of the downlights. I'm going to move this one further from the wall. I'm getting more light down into the room now and a lot less light on the wall. Sometimes that can be very helpful. If this is a mirrored wall, let's say this is a ballet studio, and you don't want to light up the dust that tends to collect on a mirrored wall, then spacing the downlights far enough from that surface can be a good thing. It also helps to isolate it. If I was adding a grazer or a wall washer for some other effect on this wall, then moving the downlights further away helps to create a separation so that the downlights are not impacting whatever light I do introduce to that wall surface. With that said, in many applications like hallways and corridors, downlights might serve multiple purposes. A downlight might be intended both to light down and to help fill the walls on either side. In those cases, and I'm going to move this again, in those cases I will tend to choose a downlight that's got a nice wide field angle rather than having a noticeable shape to it, something that acts a little more like a wall washer, blending the light out. But these are downlights. Get to know them. Figure out the ones that work for your projects. And there are so many different ways, shapes, and forms for downlight manufacturers that you will spend a good amount of your career finding the ones that you like best.